all the games I used to play in my younger, wilder days. The game of clubs and tees.
Welcome in to another episode of the Turn Fantasy Golf Podcast. I'm Joe Nicely. My normal co-host Andrew Putters is on vacation this week down in Florida, so hope you have a good trip, AP. If you've listened to us much this year, you probably know one of our goals coming into the year was to bring some fresh voices on, get some different points of view from across the PGA DFS industry. And I'm really excited who I'm going to introduce you to this week as my guest co-host. His tournament preview article is amazing and has quickly become one of the most popular articles out there. Definitely a must read for me. One of my first stops of the week. You probably know him as PGATout. John Haslbauer, how you doing, brother? Nice to have you with us.
Doing well. Thank you, Joe, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on the turn with you. I've been listening to a long time, and it's nice to be co-pilot with you today, as you said. So excited for Honda. It's been a good start to the year. I had a couple like heartbreaks with Russell Henley at Sony, and I thought Seamus Power was going to be a heartbreak at Pebble, but Tom Hagee bailed me out. So spirits are high. Honda is a tournament that probably deserves better field wise because it's such a beautiful course and a really good test and something that really does prepare players for major conditions. So, it's a better field than we've seen in the past. And I am excited to see some names that we haven't actually seen too much of yet this year. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, man. Really excited. Love the Honda. Love any kind of tough tournaments. This certainly qualifies as one. As you mentioned, the field maybe isn't what it used to be, but maybe a little bit better than it's been the last couple of years. That's something we'll dig into. Before we hop in, man, tell the folks a little bit about where they can find your stuff and what you're doing this season.
Yeah, so my Twitter is at PGATout. My weekly article tournament preview goes out every Sunday night immediately following the previous tournament, and that can be found on thelines.com. And then I do a DFS values article, pick 5 guys from either the 7 or 6K range that I think have like high placement upside or make the cut equity. That goes up on playpicks.com, and then I'll put my final betting card. I do try to kind of straddle between betting and DFS, but sort of use uniform research process to have that the sorts of takes be interchangeable between betting and DFS. So a recap of sort of my approach to the week and my betting card can also be found on the lines on Wednesday afternoons.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Thank you. We like to look back a little bit, John, before we look forward. So before we dive into the Honda, going to take a look back at Riviera. A huge win, man, for 23-year-old Joaquin Niemann, a player that I think most of us around the PGA DFS industry think is really, really talented and has a huge future. Pretty much dominant, man, wire to wire at Riviera against a star-studded field. So we definitely don't want to shortchange Joaquin Niemann. But some other things were afoot last week at Riviera. The potential of a new Saudi league seemed to kind of dominate the week. And that was probably helped by the fact that Niemann had the tournament pretty well in hand fairly early. So tons of up and downs last week. Kind of appeared to be that this thing was, at one point I heard that there was going to be an announcement the week of the Players. Seemed to be there were several guys on board that people were kind of already crossing off to be hopping over. But then some comments from Phil Mickelson came out that in an interview he had talked with Alan Shipnuck back in November, and that seemed to kind of send things spiraling in the other direction. And then we had guys like Bryson, DJ releasing statements there Sunday. 2 guys that most people assumed were going to be heading to the Saudi League. So just a ton to kind of digest there, man. Give me your thoughts on it as a golf fan and kind of how you're viewing the potential of this league. It seems to be kind of dying a slow death all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up with, honestly, that topic, because it seems to change every day. And you do need to follow up and keep tabs on it because it could very well affect the future of golf as we know it. Although it does seem like the direction it's going now is sort of south. So who knows what sort of a long-term threat it is actually going to pose. And I'm sure more details will come out of why somebody like a Bryson who seemed to be a lock in the beginning, last minute sort of dropped out. In general, my thoughts, I tweeted out, like, I wouldn't fault anybody for saying I'm about to get paid $100 million and I wouldn't make that on 10 years on the tour. And that's like generational wealth for my family. And I can play the game of golf and, sleep comfortably at night knowing I have financial security. Like, if you just want to come out and say it's a cash grab and I'm going to do it, that's totally fine. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But it would become a problem to me if somebody was trying to spew some sort of grow the game narrative of like, oh, it's good that we have competition for the PGA Tour and I'll be playing and more often overseas and I can network with people over here and grow the game that way. Like, that's not what this is. It's doing the opposite of growing the game. If you dilute the product and you take the game's best players and you sort of separate them into different tours, that's not going to grow the game. Growing the game is having the best players playing against each other every week, like something like we saw last week. Even Joaquin Niemann is a rising star. You had Colin Morikawa, you had Victor Hovland, you have Cameron Young, who knows, he could come out to be some sort of transcendent talent as well. So that's what grows the game. You get a great product out there with the best players playing against each other on the nicest courses out there. So I'm happy to hear the players like Dustin Johnson and Rory McIlroy and all the game's best are sort of committed to the PGA Tour. That's great to hear. And if Kramer Hickok and Grayson Murray want to hop over to the Saudi League, then I wish them well.
Yeah, man, for sure. It seems like, you mentioned guys like Morikawa, Neiman, Hovland. It seems like without those younger guys, this thing's going to kind of be DOA, are my thoughts on it. I think if they could have maybe grabbed, 4 or 5 up and comers, they might have had something, to work with there. But, you start talking about these guys, Phil Mickelson, Adam Scott, Lee Westwood, Ian Poulter, some of the names that have been associated with this thing. It's all guys that, their best days are behind them. Their biggest earning days are behind them. So you can see them kind of maybe trying to cash out and slide off into retirement. That's fine. I don't really know who's going to watch a tour of those guys. Seem kind of doomed to fail from the start, man, honestly. I mean, I think there'd be some novelty there, maybe if they did get something going. But I don't think we're there. So hopefully we're going to continue watching PGA Tour golf, continue betting on PGA Tour golf, continue making DraftKings lineups from PGA Tour tournaments. To swing back around to Joaquin Niemann, man, did you have any interest in him last week? What were your thoughts leading up to him? Hadn't played great at Riviera. The final results there weren't great. Mentioned him in a value play article that I did over at Rotoballer. Felt like he could break out. The results hadn't been there to this point, but with the way he'd played this year in a couple of starts, really liked how his game's looking. So give me just a couple thoughts on Joaquin Niemann.
Yeah, I guess I was the inverse of you because I bet him, but I didn't play him in DFS. So I was happy to hit the outright. That definitely covered my losses in DFS last week. But there were signs there. He top 10 at the Farmers and he top 10 at the Saudi, I believe. So his first 2 starts of the year, he was looking in good form. He was top 5 going into the weekend last year at the Genesis Invitational. I bet him last year. I think it was 50-1 that I had on him. And then he just completely combusted on the week. I think he shot 78 on Saturday. So his strokes gain numbers kind of took a hit from that, but I liked what I saw potential wise in him. He's somebody that likes to work the ball in both directions, which is something that you need to do it at the Genesis at Riviera. And the POA putting is a little shaky. I think that's why more people were not on him. But he's young and he's getting better over time as we're seeing. So I think the future is bright for him. I don't know how many wins he'll go on to win, but just another person on a long list of names on that under 25 years old on the PGA Tour that sky's the limit for him.
Yeah, totally agree. Been a fan of Joaquin for quite a while, man. It's crazy that seems like he's been around a long time. The kid's still just 23 years old. So, as you mentioned, the sky's kind of the limit, I think, with his game and potential. So definitely looking forward to him in the future. Genesis is always one of the best tournaments of the year, and he made it kind of boring, man. in a stacked field. Really dominated out there. So just a super impressive performance. And as of now, he's still scheduled to tee it up this week. Speaking of which, let's kind of shift and transition. We're moving across the country, man. The Genesis was the end of the West Coast swing. We're going all the way to Florida from California. We're going to be setting up shop for about a month down in Florida. Talk about the Honda Classic a little bit. We're going to get the Florida swing kicked off. Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. A really tough golf course. We kind of touched on PGA National, designed by Tom Fazio with George Fazio and some renovations from Jack Nicklaus. The par 70, 125 yards. Bermuda greens. Water is in play on 15 holes. There are over 75 bunkers on this golf course. So needless to say, it's pretty tricky. When the wind gets going down there especially, things can get dicey. We touched on kind of the field. Not great, to be honest. Last week we saw all 10 of the OWGR top 10 playing. This week there's 0. So pretty big difference from Genesis to Honda. But give me your thoughts on kind of the event and the golf course, man. What are you seeing? What should we be looking for this week? And just any kind of general thoughts on PGA National.
Yeah, I'm with you in that I definitely prefer watching golf on the more difficult courses. Joaquin Niemann didn't make it seem like that's what we were watching last week, but Riviera is a great test, and there's just no way that we're going to see numbers pushed to 19 under for a winner this week. I think it's almost a lock to be under 10 under. That's always dependent on the wind. This course is really exposed to the wind, and it's a course that's hard enough that doesn't need the wind as a defense. I think we've seen that in, let's say, like the Open last year, Royal St. George's, where the wind really is that course's best defense. And if there's not wind, it's actually not that tough. Definitely not the case here. There's hazards everywhere. You have to be able, you have to have narrow misses off the tee. You don't have to be the best player off the tee, but you can't be very bad. Or I guess I shouldn't say, you can't be volatile off the tee. You can't have a two-way miss that's going to get you into trouble here. So above average drivers at the golf ball approach seems to be more of a premium here. It's always a premium, but it seems to be one of the top tier courses for approach players to have success. Again, just to mitigate those misses, there's a lot of not island greens, but greens that are really protected by water that you have to be precise, and miss hits just is a penalty stroke, and you just can't afford to take too many penalty strokes on this course. And then scrambling. It's any course that's low scoring, you got to be able to get up and down for par. There's more than half of these holes that are averaging over playing over par. So you have to be able to go up and down. You have to be able to avoid bogeys. I don't necessarily model off of bogey avoidance. I think it's a weird stat, because if you played, like, let's say the Century Tournament of Champions, you avoided bogeys. Like, that doesn't mean that you're a bogey avoider. You just played a bunch of rounds on a course that you can't make bogeys on. So I'm looking more at like strokes gained total on difficult scoring courses that may not have been played within the last like 3 months, but in general, like a longer look back window to see who's playing well on the harder courses, and then scrambling. And then lastly, Bermuda. We haven't seen Bermuda in a while after that West Coast swing. So looking back at players maybe in a buy low sense who did not putt well on the West Coast swing, but are Bermuda specialists. So, put all those things together: decent driver of the golf ball, great on approach, good scrambler, and able to score in difficult conditions. And that's sort of the profile that I'm going after this week.
Yeah, man. I think we're in lockstep kind of on what we're looking for. Definitely want total driving. That's something we're looking at. To kind of zero in on the approach, I think from 150 plus yards is a pretty key area that I'm looking at. These guys are going to see some longer approach shots maybe than they're used to. You mentioned being able to avoid bogeys. I agree. It's kind of a tricky stat when you're trying to zero that in, but as you mentioned, a good way to kind of get around that is just look at the history of these guys on tougher golf courses. If you play much PGA DFS, you kind of know where the hot spots are as far as tough golf courses. Look at their history, pedigree there. That's something you can look at, and definitely agree with you on the Bermuda greens, man. I think guys that are kind of based in Florida or grew up in the Southeast, maybe played their college golf in the Southeast, you can give a bump to those guys this week. So I think we're lockstep on the course, John. If you're ready, man, let's dive into the DraftKings slate.
Let's do it.
All right, man. We're going to go kind of hit the top of the board here. Only one player at 11K or above this week. That's Sungjae M, former Honda winner at 11,000. And then players above 10K, man. I'll get your thoughts on it, John, but I think the question marks kind of start even up at the top of the board this week, man. We got Brooks Koepka coming in at 10-1, Daniel Berger at 10-4, Joaquin Niemann coming off a win at the Genesis at 10-6, and then we got Louis Oosthuizen at 10-8. Give me just kind of your initial thoughts, man. You can run through these guys player by player. Maybe give me some of your favorites. Maybe give me some concerns with these guys. I know I have a few. So just kick us off up top, man.
Yeah, I'm having a really difficult time taking a stance both from a betting standpoint and a DFS lineup construction standpoint. I think I'm leaning more towards a balanced build this week because, to your point, there's a lot of question marks up here, and it's easy to put up a big number and play yourself out of this course. There tends to be a little more randomness at this course where, the best players aren't always at the top of the leaderboard at the end of the week. We saw that last year's leaderboard was kind of madness with Brandon Hagee and Matt Jones eventually winning. So it's not necessarily a course that you need to have exposure to the best player in the field. And, despite the fact that it's a difficult course that will test your all around game, I'm not forcing myself to start up here, but I think, and we were talking about before the show, we don't really know where the ownership is going to land, but this might just be a stance where I look at the ownership on Wednesday and I start to kind of pivot to some of the leverage plays. But I think Brooks makes sense here as a Florida guy. He's super volatile. So in GPPs, maybe he makes a little more sense. I probably wouldn't play him in cash. Berger, if he comes out and says I'm 100% healthy now, then 10,400 becomes a bargain. So he's going to be interesting again. I'm probably going to fade Niemann because wire to wire victory is just very taxing, and just mentally. So I don't know if he's going to be grinding to win back to back after all of that. That would be asking a lot. Louis, I could see Louis getting into trouble with this much water everywhere, especially if he's in the hunt down the end. So he modeled number one in everything I was looking at. He makes sense here, but I could get there. I don't know if I'd need to pay 10,800 on him. And then Sungjae is 11,000. I love Sungjae this week. I think he's the deserving favorite and deserving top price guy. I think I may actually pay the premium and start with Sungjae. I think he's, in my opinion, he's pretty clearly ahead of the rest of the top guys up here.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. Sungjae certainly feels like the safest play up here. Just so consistent. We may be kind of getting numb to it, just how consistently good he is. And has played really well here. Won this event in 2020 and defended last year with the T8. So has played really well on this golf course. Played really well in Florida overall. Obviously does well on Bermuda greens. That plays a part. But totally agree with you. I think Sungjae's the safest play up here. And that would be my preference if I am going up here. This is we're going to kind of get into it as we go through it, man. This is kind of an odd salary scale. You mentioned the inconsistencies that this golf course can cause. So it doesn't feel like there's a lot of safety here. So normally in that situation, I'm looking kind of go stars and scrubs, maybe lock in a couple of guys that I feel really good about up at the top and gamble a little bit at the lower end of the salary scale. That's normally the way I'll go when I expect things to be pretty volatile. But man, this 10K range, there's no gimmies in this range, man. As you mentioned, kind of question marks with all of them. Louis, we know, at the second highest price player on the board, we know that things can go any kind of way with Louis. over 6 starts at the Honda. Just to kind of give you an example, he's got 2 WDs, 2 miscuts, and 2 top 25s. So we've seen a little bit of everything out of Louis in the past at PGA National. You mentioned Neiman coming off a win. We never know how that's going to go. Normally, I like to kind of veer away from guys coming off a win, but occasionally we'll see guys get hot. We seen Scotty Scheffler play really well last week. Saw Tom Hagee play well at Phoenix after his win at Pebble Beach. So there might be some ownership reasons there as we work towards the end of the week to maybe give Neiman a look. Berger, I think, is maybe the best fit up here. As you mentioned, there are the concerns with the back. Forced a WD at Pebble Beach, didn't look great at Phoenix. So if we knew Daniel Berger were healthy, I think he's a slam dunk. But there is that question mark there, which concerns me about Berger. And then Koepka, man, I've kind of said it. There's going to be some weeks it burns me. He played really well at Phoenix, had a top 3 there, but if it's not a major, I'm pretty much going to be out on Brooks. He's just too inconsistent to take on this type of price tag, in my opinion. Has played well here in one instance, had a runner-up in 2019, but not much else as far as on this golf course. But, he's a great player, plays tough golf course as well. So there's certainly that possibility that he comes out and wins this thing, but I don't know that I'll be there personally, man. Let's drop down in the 9s a little bit, John. Give me your thoughts on this. It's kind of a reflection of the lack of strength in this field. Some of these guys we're seeing in the 9K range this week. Kick things off with Tommy Fleetwood, go Billy Horschel, Shane Lowry, Alex Noren, a couple talented guys at the bottom of the 9s, and Matt Wolfe and Keith Mitchell. And then we have the defending Honda champion, Matt Jones, there at 9K. What's sticking out to you in this range, man?
I would say Billy Horschel's probably my favorite DFS play that we've named so far. I'll probably start my lineups with Horschel at 9,600. Florida guy, always plays the Florida swing well, is in great form right now. And he is a streaky golfer. So if you start to see form from Billy Horschel, I tend to try to ride that out until it's gone. His knock is usually the approach game, and he's looked, serviceable on approach. So, he's going to be great with a short game on Bermuda, and that's what you need to jump out at the Honda. And he has pretty good history at the Honda as well. I look at him around the other names in the 9K range, and he definitely jumps out to me from like a world golf ranking standpoint, as well as a form and fit. So I like Horschel a lot here. I almost bet him outright, but got gun shy and then his number dipped. So I probably won't bet him. And as a workaround, I'll have my exposure more heavily in DFS. And then Keith Mitchell, I think, will probably be the chalk of the 9K range. If I had to guess, won here a couple years ago, is in great form, has been playing well on courses that shouldn't necessarily fit him, like the Sony, like the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. So now he comes to a Bermuda course. He's definitely a Bermuda putting specialist. He has drove the ball sensationally well on this course, and he's usually been pretty poor on approach, but he's actually turning it around with the approach game in this little run he's had to kick off 2022. So I think he'll be popular for good reason. Seeing him in the 9,000s after he was just low 7K at Pebble Beach might make people a little gun shy on him and not completely drive the ownership up, but very sensible play here. And, I'll probably end up with a majority of my exposure is going to be to Mitchell and Horschel in this range.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, man, on both guys. Keith Mitchell certainly sticks out. Maybe my favorite player here in the 9K range, but he'll be popular this week, but probably with good reason. Over the last 12 rounds, he grades out first in this field in strokes gained ball striking and second in strokes gained tee to green. So he's been playing extremely well in 2022. And as you mentioned, now he's coming to a course where he has a win, and we know what type of player he is on Bermuda. Certainly his preferred putting surface. Billy Horschel, that you touched on, I just kind of never know where to put him, man. You mentioned him being so streaky, and I think that's true. You do have to ride the kind of the hot hand with him. Had 2 solid finishes this year in his last 2, but he gained over 5 strokes putting in each. And that's something I'm always a little bit scared to kind of rely on, but we know he He's a Florida guy, Florida Gator. Played his college golf down here, and he's tremendous on Bermuda. So there's certainly some things to like about Billy Horschel. Touch on a couple guys you didn't mention, John. Tommy Fleetwood, great course history here. A third and a fourth in 2 Honda starts. 68.75 career scoring average in this event, which is the best in the field this week. But we know there's been a noticeable dip in his form and play and results over the last couple of years. When he played here in 2020, left the week ranked number 10 in the world. He comes in this week now in this year ranked 43rd in the world. So Tommy Fleetwood's kind of fell on hard times a little bit. We saw some encouraging things over in Europe in the fall. Had a runner-up finish over there in the Italian Open. Couple of nice starts internationally to open this year. This is going to be his first start in the U.S. So, I mean, I think you can look at Fleetwood and you're just kind of hoping for the best there, but that's saying a lot at 9.9K. You mentioned price differences in comparison to kind of some other tournaments. Alex Noren, huge price jump. I think he was at 7,500 last week. He's at 9.3K this week. And I'm not sure. There have been some decent finishes. Had a T6 at Phoenix, has a third on his Honda resume, so maybe that's coming into play. But this is a guy the last 3 times out is 7.5, 7.1, and 7.5 on the DraftKings salary scale. So huge jump to swallow there for Alex Noren. And I want to get your thoughts on Matthew Wolfe, man. Certainly one of the more talented players in this field. I don't think many people would argue that. Had a tremendous swing season. I really expected big things for him. Hadn't looked great in limited starts this year. I think he's only made 2 starts in 2022. Just 1 sub-70 round this year. So give me your thoughts on Matt Wolfe, man. What are you thinking about him there at 9.2K, and what type of fit is this PGA National course for his game?
Yeah, I was very high on him at the American Express, and he was pretty terrible. One of the worst in the fields that week. So maybe I still have some scar tissue from that. I'm a little concerned about the approach because, you know, the Matthew Wolfe that you want to bet on is the one that's gaining, 4+ strokes ball striking each week. And it just hasn't been there for, since really October is the last time we saw him gain on approach. So that's a little concerning to me. At the same time, he is the type of player who we saw him take 5 or 6 months off and then come in cold into the US Open and look fantastic. So if you want a high upside GPP play, I think Matt Wolfe is always on the table. If you're betting outrights and you're just trying to figure out a spike week, I think, Matt Wolfe is never a bad idea. I think for the form, I'd like to see a little bit longer of a number. But, overall, he's a supremely talented player in a field that doesn't have that much depth and talent. So you could do worse than Matthew Wolfe at 9,200. And I think I'm with you on Tommy Fleetwood more as an outright than a DFS play, just because that 9,900 seems a little higher than I want to see, but very encouraged by what we're seeing from him on the Euro Tour now. He had gone through a stretch on the PGA Tour from the strokes gained stuff that we'd seen from him, where he was really losing the approach. And when you're playing Tommy Fleetwood, you're paying for one of the best ball strikers and best approach players in the world from, as you said, his top 10 world ranking of previous Honda Classics. He was at that level. He's kind of fallen off a bit, but it seems like just going off of like the data golf Euro Tour numbers, it seems like he's actually striking it very well. He has a 12th and an 8th in his last 2 European Tour starts to go along with 2 top 5 finishes in his 2 career appearances at the Honda. So Fleetwood's very interesting this week. I'm sort of leaning that way with my outright card. I haven't really figured out where I'm going to start it, but he seems to have that pop ability, even though he hasn't won on the PGA Tour yet.
Yeah, just kind of one of those guys where we almost, 3-4 years ago, we almost knew that a win on the PGA Tour was inevitable, and really there for several years was a force in the major championships. But that win on U.S. soil just never came. That breakthrough in the major never came. So, maybe you can get it back. I hope so. Really like Tommy, and as you mentioned, some encouraging stuff internationally. So He's an interesting outright and DFS play this week. Let's move down into the 8Ks. Once again, kind of reflects the strength or lack thereof in this field. Some of these guys we're seeing price in the 8K range this week. There's a guy at 8.9K. I'm going to let you talk about. I think you might like his prospects this week. That's Mito Pereira. Patrick Reed, normally we would be jumping on him at this price in this field, but the form has been absolutely horrible. Whether we want to chalk that up to just being out of form, made an equipment change to PXG, using some of their stuff. Who really knows with Reed? He's never popped statistically, honestly, throughout his career, but we have seen strong finishes and at different times, obviously, but that's just not been the case to this point. Cameron Young coming off a kind of a star-making turn out at Riviera. We've seen some impressive results from him this year. Interested to hear your thoughts on the course fit potentially this week. Jonathan Vegas has some really nice course history. I'm very encouraged by the way he struck the ball last week at Riviera. So I think we can certainly give Vegas a look. He'll probably be popular kind of in that Keith Mitchell bucket. Aaron Wise, a player kind of like Matthew Wolfe, I was very high on coming in this year, but hasn't looked good at all to this point. Kind of take a little solace in the fact that he's never played really well during the West Coast swing. So, maybe he can get some things going here. The course history is decent at PGA National. Then we round things out. Mackenzie Hughes, Gary Woodland, Russell Knox, Christian Zadenhout. Any favorites sticking out for you here in the 8K range, John?
Well, I got one guy sticking out, Mr. Mito Pereira. Who
talk to me about Mito, man. Anybody that follows you knows you've kind of been touting this as Mito week for a while. So dive into it for me. Break it down. Why Mito's going to win this week?
Yeah, I got a lot of confidence in him. He's new to the tour, and we started to see him come on, towards the end of 2021. After his Korn Ferry promotion, he had 3 wins on the Korn Ferry Tour, and that really turned some heads because that just doesn't happen. I think it's happened once in the last 30 plus years that somebody's won 3 times in a season to get that automatic promotion. So once he did that, he got on everybody's radar. I'm certainly not the only person to be singing Mito Pereira's praises, but when we saw him early in the season, it seemed like he was sort of staying in that top 30 range, not really pushing in contention before the Fortinet. This year was really the first time we saw him really push for it. Even the Olympics, he was in the bronze finals, so he was starting to get there. But in general, he was kind of lingering back in the top 30s. And what I noticed from him was just making a lot of pars, not really getting himself into too much trouble off the tee and hitting it well on approach and being a fine scrambler, but just leaving with a lot of pars. And so when I started to see that, I was like, okay, where do we reward making pars the most? And it's got to be PGA National, where there's only 4 holes that average under par, and 2 of those are the par 5s. So I kind of circled this event on the calendar as I was looking down the line of like, where am I going to play Mito in one and done? Where does it make the most sense? And at the time, at the end of the 2021 season, where I was like, okay, it's going to be Honda. Mito was a struggling putter who in the last 2 events of the season gained like 3 and 4 strokes back to back in his last 2 Bermuda events. So I was like, okay, maybe it's just Bermuda. Since then, it's just been every surface, and he's gained in the last 5 or 6 straight events, I believe, at least 1 full stroke, which even the elite putters, you don't really see that from. So over the last 3 months, he's actually number 1 in strokes gained putting, which if you asked me that 3 months ago, I would say that's impossible. And I would also probably say that he's probably won 10 times if that's the case. The ball striking sort of went away for a little bit. But he definitely showed that the approach prominence that we've seen from him seems to be coming back at the Genesis, where he had a top 20 finish, had a couple holdouts, which he was doing at the Fortinet as well. So a good sign that the irons are getting back dialed in. The off the tee numbers have kind of been at a 0, but that's okay on this course. You really just want to shine with your elite approach and short game, and then just make a bunch of putts. That's what he's doing right now. He's number 2 in bogey avoidance, and he's top 5 and really all of the proximity stats and total driving, approach, ball striking statistics that I was looking at for this week. So I think the 8,900 price tag was definitely higher than I expected to see from a DFS standpoint. I'm actually surprised to see him priced ahead of Cameron Young, who's had a better stretch and is higher in the FedEx Cup points for the season so far, and coming off a more impressive week last week, where this is both of their first times coming here. So I am a little surprised to see him at that price. I think that does help his ownership a little bit. A lot of people are talking about him, not just me this week. So he will be popular. I'm interested to see where his ownership lands. I would guess probably somewhere in like the 12 to 14%. But I think he's going to win this week. So ownership doesn't matter to me. I'm just going to put him in every single one of my lineups.
Okay. You talked me into it. I'm there with you. I actually really like Mito as well, man. Have locked him for a while. And his 2 best outings this year, if we're kind of going to draw some circular comparisons around the PGA National, his 2 best starts, he's coming off a T15 at Riviera. Also played really well at Torrey Pines. Those are 2 golf courses where par is a pretty good score. So there's some similarities there, and kind of makes you want to lock him this week at PGA National where par is a good score. So I'm with you on Mito. Cameron Young, you mentioned, really talented young player, man. He almost got that KFT Battlefield promotion like Mito did. He won 2 times on the KFT last year. Couldn't get that 3rd victory, but has played really well, man. Obviously last week coming off a runner-up finish at Riviera. We saw a runner-up finish at the Sanderson, I believe, back in the fall. So last week wasn't a fluke. He played well at Torrey. So I think Cameron Young's a guy we're going to want to keep our eye on moving forward. You got any thoughts on some of these course history guys, a Johnny Vegas or an Aaron Wise? Any thoughts on kind of the lower 8K range, John?
Yeah. For me, there were 2 clear-cut guys in the 8K range. One was Mito and the other is Mackenzie Hughes. He's actually been on this sneaky run where over the last 50 rounds, he's 5th in this field in strokes gained total. And I was looking at his numbers, and a lot of his best performances are coming on the comp courses. I don't think the RSM Classic is a great fit is a great comp to this, but it is another short course where wind is definitely in play. And we heard Taylor Gooch after that round say basically the same comments that Matt Jones said after his win at the Honda, where his experience hitting different flighted shots and his comfortability under pressure to hit a low ball or a high ball, depending on what the wind required, was key to winning there. So I think there's some correlations to draw from ball striking at the RSM Classic, and Mackenzie Hughes finished runner up there. He has another 4th place at the Zozo, which was a very difficult course. So it just in general, I think we've seen him do his best work on these grinder courses. Had a 6th at the Open, and at the Memorial, I believe he had one of his better finishes, which is another.
He was in the thick of things at the he was in the thick of things at the U.S. Open last year as well, man.
That's right, yeah, and he's a short game specialist. He's going to pop with the putter more often than not, and from a ball striking standpoint, he'll probably be a 0 off the tee. If he can gain half a stroke or 1, great. And there is potential in the approach. He gained 6 strokes on an approach at the RSM Classic. So, he has potential definitely beyond just the short game. And he had a runner up to Sung J M in 2020 at this event, where he really did enough to win. And he lost 3 strokes on approach that year. So just tells you how great he was short game. He gained over 11 strokes for the short game. So that is something that Mackenzie Hughes does. And you can win this event with your short game if everybody's missing greens, and it just comes down to making the most pars and taking advantage of birdie opportunities when you get them.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's not very popular, especially in kind of the DFS world, to focus on putting and short game. Most guys want to focus on ball striking, and that's totally understandable and makes tons of sense. But these guys can win tournaments with their short game, with their putter. I mean, we've seen Kevin Na win a lot of golf tournaments. We've seen Patrick Reed win a lot of golf tournaments. And I think Hughes kind of falls in that bucket with those guys. We're not going to see blow you away ball striking numbers from him, but his results bear it out that there are going to be weeks that he just gets it done, in other ways. So, like the call on Mackenzie Hughes, maybe we can catch him flying under the radar a little bit in this 8K range. So I'll certainly be looking there myself as well. Let's move on down into the sevens, man. Kind of move through here real quick. Lots of guys that are playable, lots of names that we know, but lots of volatility, man. Who's jumping out to you in the 7K range? Got some veterans up at the top of the board. Ryan Palmer, who's got a kind of some star-crossed history at this golf course. Lee Westwood, who's played well here, but we haven't seen much of lately in the U.S. We got a youngster coming over from the Euro Tour, Nikolai Hogard in the mid sevens. Ian Poulter and Ricky Fowler, grinders that can play this golf course. Ricky especially has tremendous course history here. A Michael Thompson, former winner with a good track record. Lucas Glover, same can be said. Give me your thoughts on some of these guys. Who are some of your favorites sticking out in the 7Ks, man?
Yeah, I think the upper half, nobody really jumps out to me that I'm dying to play. You could make an argument for Ricky Fowler, again, GPP upside, best course history of anybody in this field, 7,600 for a guy of his caliber, and looked fantastic at the CJ Cup, which is not that long ago. I mean, it was 4 months ago, but it's not that many PGA Tour starts ago. So I could understand the case for him. I probably won't get there. Michael Thompson is probably the first name at 7,500 that I like here. He's someone who's won at the Honda Classic ever since he grew out the beard. Seems to be a different player. Opened up 2022 with a 5th at the Sony Open and 11th at the Farmers. Sony Open has a lot of correlation with this course. Russell Henley, Justin Thomas, Matt Kuchar all winning at both within the last decade. So I think that's another course where it's a little shorter and you have to navigate the wind on Bermuda greens. So I think that's encouraging. And at the Farmers, that's a difficult grind of a course. So he's another one of those short game specialist guys who I think can go up and down a little bit where you need him to and save pars and grind that way. And he's had fine results so far in 2022 without really finding the putter yet. So he might be somebody. I don't know if I'll either build around in DFS or throw an outright flyer, but I do like his potential. And then Aaron Rai at 7,400. I think a lot of guys got a big overreaction bump to some recent play. And I'm not really convinced that Aaron Rai isn't in the same conversation as Cameron Young and Mito Pereira on 2022 season performance alone from the Korn Ferry grads. Like you could argue that he's been the best this season of any of the recent guys from the Korn Ferry Tour. He's got a 6th at the Farmers where he was in contention throughout. He's got top 20s at Mayakoba, Houston Open, and RSM Classic all this season. So the guy's a really good ball striker. He gains ball striking pretty much every time we've seen him this season. And he just has the ability to gain in all 4 major categories, which you're going to need on a grinders course like this. I also like that he played in the WGC Workday at the Concession last year, which I think is probably the best comp you're going to find to the Honda Classic. Another Nicklaus design in Florida on Bermuda greens with water kind of threatening throughout. So he was top 20 there, which is encouraging before he kind of got into this good form. I think he's a guy that you can count on to make it through the cut. He's made it in it looks like 7 of his last 8 or 9 of his last 10 events. He's made it through the cut. And at 7,400, he's going to save you some salary with some pretty good upside.
Yeah, I don't mind Rye. I think he's a solid young player. I haven't been there maybe as much as some others have to this point. And, in hindsight, that's probably been a mistake, but, certainly a solid player. I think he could play well this week. You can definitely give him a look. Another guy coming up off the KFT, kind of in that similar price point there at 7,400, kind of been a pet player of mine, and he struggled pretty mightily throughout the swing season. right when he moved up to the PGA Tour. But Grayson Sieg is a guy that I really like, especially on this type of golf course, because he does hit it so straight. We started to see the results kind of flatten out, putting forth some really solid, like top 25, top 30 efforts this season. So I think you can give Sieg a look. A guy I didn't want to touch on, you mentioned Michael Thompson, who's very interesting to me. Another guy kind of in that same vein is Lucas Glover, a guy that you never know what you're going to get from 1 week to the next. But he's actually been really consistent at PGA National, which is crazy. Top 25s in 4 of his last 5 Honda starts. And we've seen some good play from him this year. So I think you can give Lucas Glover a look. Man, listen, a lot of these guys are scary this week. There's a lot of these guys are almost like the same guy, like Lucas Glover and Ryan Palmer. They're the same guy to me this week. Either could top 5 or miss the cut. Poulter, Westwood, Fowler, these kind of veteran guys. Same thing. They're all kind of in the same bucket for me. None really standing out above the other right now. So I think the 7Ks are just full of volatility. Another young guy I'll mention down there at kind of the lower end of the 7s is Alex Smalley. He's a player I really like. Got in late to Genesis, I believe, when Matt Fitzpatrick withdrew, made the cut out there. And we saw some kind of tough efforts from him in not the greatest of situations. He was trying to Monday qualify for events last year. Got in a couple fields and made some runs. Did eventually earn his PGA Tour card at the KFT Finals. So keep an eye on Alex Smalley. I just think he's got a lot of moxie and he's a tough player. As we get down in the 7s, the low 7s, high 6s, kind of thins out. Some names we know down here. Give me your thoughts as we get into kind of dart throw territory, man.
Yeah, I think Stuart Sink is interesting. 7,100 in a weak field. He's never missed the cut at this event in his last 10 starts. So definitely an appealing top 30 bet and cut maker salary saver down here. The form hasn't been the best recently, but you look around at the crop of talent around him, and this is a guy who won twice on the PGA Tour last year and likes Bermuda greens, being from the greater area in Georgia. So I think you could do worse than Sink. And then Hudson Swafford is also very interesting at 7,100, coming off a win. Again, we're talking about win equity at this point from really cheap guys in a pretty weak field. Doesn't have the best course history at Honda, but he's been striking it really well on approach. Gained 4 strokes on approach at Phoenix and 4 again at the Amex when he won. The putter's been letting him down recently, but he is one of those poppers where if he just gets it going and gets streaky, he can do some damage. So I think there's a lot of upside with those two guys that I'm kind of considering from a top 40 betting standpoint. I see a little more volatility with Swafford, who you don't really know what you're going to get, but Sink feels like a safe if you just need one cheap guy to round out your lineup and get you through the cut. He's never not done that here. So I like him as a sort of security blanket play.
Yeah, not bad calls at all, man. Kind of a rule of thumb for me. Tougher courses like this one, especially a sub 7,200 yard golf course. Don't mind leaning veteran. Guys that have kind of seen the ins and outs of the PGA Tour, seen every type of course you can throw at them, can play these difficult layouts well. So a guy like Stuart Sink, I'm totally in agreement with you there. I think you can give him a look. Hudson Swafford's another one. You mentioned kind of the Southeastern connection there from him, and that's what we're looking for down here, man. Not necessarily a guaranteed made cut. I'm looking for guys that could make a run. And while I do like the veterans, I think there's some talented young players down here. I mentioned Alex Smalley. I'll also toss out Davis Riley, another really talented young player that we kind of seen pop a little bit earlier in the year. I think we can maybe give him a look in this field. Doc Redmond's a player that we like that's kind of turning a corner a little bit, it feels like. Had a couple of nice outings there at the Farmers and at Pebble. Made the cut last week. And as we go on down, Austin Smotherman is another young player I'll toss out there. Had a T11 at Torrey, a tough golf course, and follow that up with a T33 at Pebble. Hadn't teed it up since. Still at that point where he's trying to get into fields. But I think you can look at Austin Smotherman. Not much else I like, man, going down through here. As I kind of mentioned at the top, this is a week where I'd normally want to lean stars and scrubs, but the combination of the kind of question marks up at the top and the really hit and miss nature of this lower end of the salary scale makes things tough. I think you said you were maybe leaning towards a balanced build, and that might be the way I end up going this week too, man. Anything down on down the salary scale, John, as on down into the sixes, any kind of dart throws you're locking?
Yeah, I would say Kramer Hickok is probably the guy of the 6Ks I feel most comfortable with. He's played the Honda Classic twice and finished top 30 both times. Has pretty good history on some of the recent comps. Finished 20th at the Sony Open. Really good off the tee. So I feel pretty confident that he can avoid the hazards here, which I think is why he's had some of that early success. The around the green game is a little bit of a concern with Hickok, which is not ideal, but that's how you find yourself at 6,800 in a field like this. But he has some upside there. He could have easily won the Travelers, and if he's a PGA Tour winner and just gets past Cantlay in any of those 16 playoffs, whatever it is, we think of Kramer Hickok a little differently. So I think you could do worse than him at 6,800. Other dart throws like Brendan Hagee has spectacular history here. He's got 2 top 20s and the runner up here last year. His form is awful, but his form has never been really good coming into this event. So just seems to be a course that suits his eyes, a longer hitter, and can set up some like shorter wedge shots on this course. So I think you could do worse than him. And you touch on Smotherman. I think he's a guy who I've seen some very long betting odds on. Not necessarily correlated with his DFS price, but has been the approach has been there. I'm not really sure how he is on Bermuda because he's a rookie, and we've really seen him come on the West Coast. So we'll see if that translates. But yeah, I'm with you. I sometimes I do get cute and go really low in the 6K range and convince myself on course history guys and stuff of that nature. But I really don't see a ton that's appealing. There's a lot of long tail to this field where there's 40 plus guys who I just don't think have any chance to contend this week. So yeah, I'm leaning balanced. I would love to be able to fit Sung Jae in a lineup, but it's going to be tricky with these options.
Yeah, I agree, man. Especially we kind of got spoiled the last few weeks. We had stack lineup, stack field last week at the Genesis. We had a really, really nice field in Phoenix and the Farmers as well. So kind of back to reality. This is almost like an Amex or a Pebble Beach top salary scale. So we're going to have to make some adjustments considering what we've dealt with the last few weeks. I'm with you. Not a ton down here that I love. Another kind of mindset, if you want to kind of take an alternative mindset, is that, this is a very tough golf course. Anything can happen on it. There's big numbers out there. The middle of the board isn't great. So I don't hate it if you want to go with the stars and scrubs top build. It's just tough, pinpointing these guys that you want to circle and feel comfortable locking into your lineups. But that said, man, since we're down here at the low end of the range, we're going to wrap things up, John. We like to do a little segment called the darts and hearts. So I'm going to ask you to pick a dart play, who's kind of your deep dive, out of the box pick. And I'm going to ask you for a heart play. I think I already know who that one is, but, go ahead and give me your dart for this week, man.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple different, we touched on a lot of the guys that just grasping at straws for darts in this field. I would say the highest upside, low price or long shot guy that I see in this field is Hudson Swafford. And we were just talking about him, but he just won. And I've seen 180 to 1 odds on him. I see 7,100 on a player just won who's one of the best approach players in this field. especially recently, and approach is so important here. So I'm not sure if I'm going to actually bet it at 180 to 1, but I like it. And I think the upside is there. And then, as we said, it's obviously Mito for me. Didn't touch on the Chilean narrative, but obviously just watched his best buddy Joaquin Niemann win last week. So hopefully he doesn't spend his time partying and instead spends his time motivated to hoist a trophy himself. I think that he will. I'll be playing him one and done. I'll be playing him on my betting card, and I'll be playing him in all of my DFS lineups.
I love it, man. Just because you came on the show with me this week, I'll have a Mito out route as well. I'm tossing that one out there just for you, man. My dart, man, you said it, not a lot to love. I'll toss out Brandon Hagee down there, just because of the course history. I do a course history article every week, and course history is really weird, man. You kind of think that you want to see some form from these guys coming into courses where they play well, but you don't necessarily need to. It's kind of one of the things I've learned diving into course history over these last few years. A course that a guy's comfortable with can create good form. So you don't necessarily need to see them playing well as they're heading in. So I think you can look at Hagee. That'll be my dart throw this week. My heart, man, tough to really get solidly behind anybody in this field, it feels like, but I'll throw out Keith Mitchell. He's a player I like, a player I've been rostering a lot this year. Like the fit, like where his ball striking is from tee to green. Obviously love him on Bermuda. So my heart says Keith Mitchell. That's who I'm going with this week. But as we close things out, man, just want to thank you again, John, for joining us. We hope to have you back at another time this year. Everybody listening, if you're not already, you probably already are, but go follow John at PGATout on Twitter. Check out his articles every week. You can follow me at Joe Nicely on Twitter. Follow the turn on Twitter. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube and on Apple. We really appreciate that stuff. If you give us a thumbs up, give us a like, really goes a long way to helping us. So thank you guys for joining us. Hope you have a great week and good luck at the Honda.
It's gone.